name is Jake Spear. I'm at the State Library. We're going to go ahead and start. So thank you all for being here today. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to go over the resources that we at the State Library have developed to help you all during this time. And although we've been working from home, like many of you, if not all of you, we are available to answer your calls and emails. So please continue to contact us with any questions you may have about your library operations or board meetings or other things. Today is the fourth and final meeting that we are doing, and we've become pretty proficient at using this software, but we do have some issues once in a while, so please bear with us. Our 3 meetings so far have had about 300 people combined attending, and it looks like we have a little over 50 today. So we're really pleased that with our people that are attending these. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And I just wanted to mention that we have recorded all the sessions. So if you'd like to rewatch it or have a staff member or board member watch any of the recordings, you can do so. We've also put up the PowerPoint and documents on our COVID-19 page. And we're also trying to summarize the chat questions that come through, and we'll be putting up those as well because there's been some good questions and I think good answers that we've been providing. So today's meeting is scheduled to go till 11:30, and we have a whole host of speakers from the Library Development Office and Professional Development Office. And we'll be going over the resources available on the State Library's COVID-19 page. And I'll take you there now. This one. I'm sorry, hold on just 1 second. So here is our COVID-19 page. So if you go back, this is our home page, of course, and then the COVID-19 link is up here in the upper left-hand corner. And if you go there, you will see the executive orders from the governor's office, the legal memos that Sylvia Watson and Sherry Harris have created, and a lot of other resources that staff and Professional Development Office and Library Development Office have all created. Wanted to mention a few things before turning it over to Laura. The first is that we're taking a lenient approach to a number of things that seem really important prior to COVID-19 or less so. And if everyone can please mute your computers, please. Thanks. The first is that certification renewals and temporaries that would have occurred during this time, so beginning in early March through the end of May, those have been extended until May 22nd. So certification renewals and temporaries are extended until May 22nd. And so we'll be taking care of that. And then also if there's any audits that have occurred as far as sending out a self-audit to demonstrate your continuing education, that has been extended 2 months as well. So we're trying to take a very lenient approach to certification deadlines. Also, the 2020 public library standards. So these are the standards you'll be reporting in January and February of 2021. We will be providing more information as we get a better scope of how this is impacting libraries. But of course, this is impacting, libraries being able to do programming, have hours, a whole host of things, and your budgets will likely be impacted as well. So we anticipate issuing or making recommendation to the Indiana Library and Historical Board for waivers and being very lenient because of the COVID-19 in 2020. So we'll provide more guidance as we get further along. And also the annual report will have areas for you to list things, why the standard, your library didn't meet standards, because of course it's mainly going to be just COVID-19 and budgeting. So that will be their approach from the State Library and the Indiana Library Historical Board. And also, I just want to mention on that page are the different orders as far as social distancing, the being closed and things. So this is a really good one-stop place for you to view our information that we have. So now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Jones of the Professional Development Office. She's fairly new, and she is the new Northwest Regional Consultant. So for those of you who have not met her, she'll be your regional consultant. So I'll turn it over to Laura.
All right, thank you, Jake. I'm going to share some informational slides with you. Do you guys see my agenda? All right. So first, I want to draw your attention to a couple of resource documents that we have compiled the last month or so. These can be found on our continuing education webpage, and the web address is at the top of the slide. The first list is our activities and resources for the COVID-19 crisis. And then there's a list of COVID-19 webinars and resources for libraries. And these are webinars that are relating to the pandemic and libraries. Looks like there's a little lag here on my slides. Okay, so the first is the activities and resources. And these include all sorts of categories. They're broken up into categories to help you find what you're looking for. There's virtual museum tours, coding resources, information about cleaning, disinfecting. There's even a link on how to make medical face shields on your 3D printer. So there's so much great information on this list. If you haven't taken a look at it yet, you'll want to make sure to check it out. This was put together by the PDO office. So it's a really great resource for you in your libraries. And next is the webinar list. We've compiled this list so you could have easy access if you missed a webinar or if you want to rewatch a webinar. The recording links and the handouts are available when provided by the webinar giver. And if you want to watch one webinar, we all highly recommend the webinar that the IMLS and the CDC did about managing paper-based library materials and mitigating COVID-19. So that webinar is included on here. I also want to make sure that everyone knows about our library listservs and where to find the lists on our page. So first you'll click on Services for Libraries on this screen, and then you'll scroll down to where it says Additional Resources for Librarians, and then you'll see Listservs for Librarians. Okay, and then there are several listservs available, and they're open to anyone who works in a library. At the very least, make sure that you've subscribed to the All Indiana Library Professionals listserv, and if you're in the public library, that's in PubLib. So that's the first one up there. The state library sends pertinent information on COVID-19 out to the listserv, and any official announcement from Indiana State Library or any trainings or legal memos, all of that is shared with the listservs. You can also sign up for our Wednesday Word, which is the weekly e-newsletter, and that's actually on our main page under Blog and Newsroom. And then last, just in case you didn't already know, the Professional Development Office has 4 regional coordinators and a children's consultant in place to support all of our library workers. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to contact the coordinator in your region, and we're more than happy to help out. If you don't know the answer, we'll find the person who does, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you need help with anything. Okay, and that's it for me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to, actually Paula is going to be filling in today and telling you about continuing education resources. So let me get that going. Okay, Paula.
Okay, I'm hoping you're seeing this. Just a second. You guys seeing the slideshow yet? Maybe not.
Not quite yet.
It worked in practice a few minutes ago. Just a second, guys. I am so sorry.
No worries.
There it goes. Are you seeing it now?
Not yet.
Go back.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, just a second. Screen 2. I think that's the one. All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, I didn't get
Got
a
it.
chance to practice this morning.
No worries.
Okay, and now just 1 second again. You still seeing it? Okay, I am here stepping in for Kara Cleveland. She couldn't make it today, but we're going to do a walkthrough for our continuing education opportunities. You probably all noticed there's just been a really big push to do a lot of professional development lately while we've all been at home. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get the next screen to come up. Did it move? I don't think I have it quite right yet. There we go. Okay, do you see the second page?
Yep.
Okay, so first thing on our web page, on the Indiana State Library page, it's www.in.gov/library. You'll be clicking on the services for libraries. They're on the right and left-hand side, and then you'll click on it again once this page comes up. After that, you'll get to our page that is for professional development. You'll click on the continuing education link. And then next on this page, you'll see a lot of different links on the top. The one I'm going to emphasize right now is our calendar. When you click on that, you can get to all of our current offerings. There's also registration links. This is what the calendar looks like. You've seen a lot of things we had to cancel because of the COVID. So that's a sample from our calendar. If you back up to the previous page, you can also click on the Find Training link. That's where you're going to find a whole bunch of other trainings that we have. On this page, I'm going to emphasize the first one. It's the ISL's online training series. That's what we put together for all of our current webinars that we're doing, that we've scheduled, and that is what it looks like. You'll also be able to click on that and also go to the registration page as well. The next thing we're going to talk about are our archived webinars. We've saved all of the webinars that we've done. We've also transcribed them, so they're available for you to watch if you weren't able to watch it when they were live. And also, if you do watch a webinar that's archived, you can still get an LEU. The thing is, you'll have to make your own LEU form certificate for that, and just have either your director sign that form, or also I think the president of library boards can also sign them as well. Sometimes, now that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a second. We have another thing that we look at. Before I go to that, though, this is what our transcribed archived webinars look like. We have them arranged by categories, and you can see what is on each of the webinars. There's a little description, or also the picture there also kind of describes or shows you what's going to be in the webinar. Now, this is what Kara puts together. She puts together upcoming free trainings. She goes out on the web and searches for all kinds of free training opportunities. It sounds like those are the ones also that are pre-approved trainings that are on our pre-approved trainings list. Sometimes with those, also, if you do not get a LEU certificate from those trainings, you can make your own, or sometimes they will provide LEUs as well for that you don't have to make your own certificate. And that's another look at what the page looks like. She's got it by month. And also you can see a little bit more by the date. So if you have anything else you need help with professional development, just feel free to contact any one of us at the professional development office. That's all from me. Thanks.
Okay, next we have Beth.
Hi guys, let's see. We need to request control. No?
Just share your screen. Or
yeah, I don't have any slides. There we go.
There we go.
All right. Hi everybody, I'm Beth. I'm the children's consultant at the State Library. I just have a couple of quick announcements. The first one is that I know summer reading is at the forefront of many of your minds. And I did a summer reading webinar last week that was recorded. There were 162 people there live, so many of you maybe already watched it, but if you didn't, it's available on our archived webinar page now, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. There it is. So if you want to go back and watch that, all of the documents that I created associated with that webinar are also posted on that page. So check it out. And it's especially good for those of you who are feeling overwhelmed and not really sure where to start with planning for a virtual or at least partially virtual summer reading. So hopefully some of those documents in the webinar will help walk you through those steps. I think I should also mention that last week we created a Google Doc that is somebody need to be muted? We created a Google Doc that is full of virtual programming ideas that is crowdsourced by librarians in Indiana. So I'm going to put the link to that here too. So if you have a great virtual programming idea that you would like to share with others, I encourage you to go to this list and add it. Likewise, you can go to the list and get some great ideas. Also, something that is at the bottom that we added on Monday is a list of library YouTube pages. So if your library has a YouTube page and you want other libraries to subscribe or follow that YouTube page, because the more viewers you get, the more people might discover it, you can add your library's YouTube page to the end of that list. So it's at the bottom after all of the program ideas. So check that out. The only other thing I want to make sure that speaking of programming ideas, the Collaborative Summer Library Program is developing some virtual program ideas. They're taking ideas from this year's manual and also some from last or previous year's manuals, and they're adapting them so they can be done virtually. And they are hoping that that list will be available to share by May 1st. So I will share it out as soon as it is sent to me, because I want you guys to have that in your hands. I'm sure it will be some really great ideas. And then now the last thing I want to mention is that ILF still has at least one more Youth Services Networking event. They've been holding them every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Youth Services librarians who just want to kind of get on, talk about things that are worrying them, talk about plans for programs in summer, whatever they want to talk about. And if you're interested in that and you want to sign up, you can go to the ILF website, go to their event calendar, and look for Youth Services Networking and get the link from there. I think that is all that I have. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Beth. Now we're going to go to the Library Development Office and we're going to hear from Angela Fox.
Angela, do you know you're on mute?
Angela, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my screen completely froze up. I can't take it off mute. I can't share anything. Is my screen shared?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. I've been having connectivity issues all morning, so that was just bad timing. But now that I'm here, I'm going to try to talk fast and get through this before it freezes up again. LSTA grants, a couple notes for anyone who might be listening who is currently a grantee. Odds are you've already talked to me at some point in the last couple weeks. And if you have any questions, you're free to talk to me in the next couple weeks. But the most important thing I need you to know is to keep an eye on those spending deadlines and the claims deadlines. Those are two that we no longer have any wiggle room. We have completely extended our wiggle room on those. We have to report our own spending to IMLS. So as I said, we just cannot push any deadlines back any further than we have. So make sure you know what the last day for you to spend that money is. For some of you, that's coming right up at the end of this month. I know that a lot of people will not be able to completely spend down their grants, and that is unfortunate. I know that a lot of people won't be able to finish the project portion of their grant, and that is unfortunate. But that is what that final narrative report is going to reflect. So just know that we are aware this has caught a lot of you at a really bad time in your projects, that we had to essentially freeze everything mid-project, and it's not going to reflect poorly on your stewardship of the grant. We're not going to put this as a black mark in the book for future grants for you. We understand that this is out of everyone's, this is out of everyone's hands at this moment. So we just ask that, again, you do your best to document that in the final narrative report, and to make sure that you get all that paperwork to us on time by those deadlines. If you have any question when those are, if you're not sure if you did get an extension or not, be sure to let me know and I can look that up for you. For people who are thinking of becoming or hoping to become a grantee for this upcoming cycle, we did extend the application deadline, but that newly extended deadline is just around the corner. That's actually Friday, this coming Friday, April 24th. So if you're working on that application, or if you backburnered it, make sure that you pull it back up, dust it off, and get it to us before that deadline comes up. If you have any questions, as always, you can reach out to me. If there are digitization questions, I might put you in contact with Justin Clark, who is our Digital Initiatives Director, and he is great at giving you answers as to anything you might need to know to get that digitization section filled out. As far as adjusting project timelines, I'm getting more and more questions about what library closures are going to mean for project timelines, both on the state library side, as far as, is our grant cycle staying the same? Are we starting at the same time? Are we ending at the same time? And what this is going to do to your individual timelines. I can tell you that we're going to try to keep the grant cycle roughly the same as it's been in previous years. Obviously, we're already starting off a little late, having pushed back that deadline for applications, but I want to kind of catch up a little bit and get to the point where we can have those grants hopefully coming out to you and active at some point in the summer, and we'll be trying to wrap it up in April again of 2020, assuming everything goes well. As far as adjusting your project timelines, I realize that a lot of people have completed applications, and there's a portion as far as activity timelines and planning that may be skewed now, because again, it's really hard to figure out how to plan around library closures or phased reopenings, things like that. Don't let that worry you at this point. If you get a grant and we need to make some adjustments, that's just fine. We'll face that when we get to it. But it's something we're aware of and we'll work with you on. And then finally, a huge thank you to the people who have agreed to serve on a review committee for this. It makes such a huge difference having a variety of opinions and backgrounds, and I really appreciate that. For anyone who is on the fence about it or still considering it, I will say that this is something that can easily be done from home. You'll just be reviewing a portion of the grants, filling out a rubric, and then at some point we will have a meeting to discuss the rankings and questions we have, or and anything about the grants in particular. And I can almost certainly assure you that that is going to be virtual at some point. I cannot anticipate a scenario in which we'll get together in person. So all of this can be done remotely. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. I will also point out that if you've applied for a grant, you might still be able to serve on a review committee. You would not be able to serve on the review committee for the grant, this specific grant you've applied for. So if you've applied for a digitization grant, you couldn't serve on that committee, but you would be able to serve on the technology committee and vice versa. So don't think that just because you have your hat in the ring for one grant that you have to sit out the experience entirely if you're curious to see what it's like on the other side of that review or grant process. Moving on, hopefully. There we go. Annual report. Jake touched on this a bit when he kicked us off, that we know that some of the statistics are going to radically be changed. There's going to be, as he said, some leniency with the standards, and we use the annual report in part to check on standards. The other huge thing that's really going to change that we've been getting a lot of questions about would be programming statistics, because obviously in-person programming is going to take a huge dive. And I know a lot of you are using this time to experiment with or bulk up on your virtual programming for your communities, and that is wonderful. And we've been discussing how to best capture that. If you've been on the listservs, you've probably seen the evolution of that thought process. We originally did say that we were only going to count virtual programs that were live stream and count those views, but we got a lot of really great and thoughtful feedback from people about things like recorded programs being posted on websites for viewing at later times. And having heard some of that, we would like to make it so that you can record or you can track those recorded programs as well. So as of now, we are asking you to go ahead and continue to track in-person programs throughout the year, as you always do, but to also start tracking any virtual programming you do, and to keep separate categories for live virtual programs, those that are done via Zoom or Skype or Facebook Live or YouTube streaming, things like that, and keep track of those live people who are logging on live, and then to also keep track of recorded programs and those page views. Because of the way we report that to IMLS, it is pretty important that you keep those two virtual categories separate. And if you have any questions about that, this is a recurring theme, feel free to ask me. Let's see, so that's the programming. Oh, the anticipated drop. Again, we know that not just programming, but things like visits and reference questions and physical circulation is going to have a pretty steep decline this year. And that's going to happen nationally. We're anticipating that obviously in all of our states. IMLS knows that that's coming down the road. That's nothing to worry about as far as, what does this mean for you on the annual report? What it means is that the report just happens to reflect exactly what's happening in 2020, which is we're closed for a pandemic, and that's absolutely fine. Part of the purpose of the report is to serve as a snapshot for library trends in a particular year or over a course of year. So it makes sense that we are seeing those drops, and we do have a record of how this pandemic is reflecting. So as Jake said, there will be a place to fill in on the annual report if there's any triggers or edit checks that come up that says, why are you so short, or why is there such a difference? And all you'll have to put is closed for COVID or closed for quarantine or pandemic, or however you choose to phrase that. But that's not something you need to worry about as far as meeting certain standards or meeting certain numbers. We see that coming, and that's absolutely fine. So that's going to be about it for my portion, and I will turn that over to Nicole.
Actually, Angela, we do have a question here.
Oh, sure. Again, I'm sorry, so much of mine is freezing here. So
that's okay. It looks like someone wants to know, does participation on library blogs count? And then she clarified any type of patron interaction, blogs, Facebook, Pinterest page.
Oh, now we can discuss at some point as far as patron interactions, like, are you answering reference questions? Because those are going to go ahead and be counted as your reference interactions. If you're giving readers advisory, that would be a reference interaction. So what you're doing on the blogs as far as reference interactions may be counted in some other statistical instance. I can't really imagine a blog or an online interaction one that would necessarily count as a program, especially if you keep in mind that part of the definition of the program is that it is open to a group, and these blogging instances are usually one-on-one interactions, and that's something that programming definition precludes. So for the most part, even if you have an interactive board set up, it's just not going to hit enough of that programming definition. So we would say, you can keep track of your web hits for your own statistics if you want, certainly, but there's probably not going to be a place to report out some of those types of interactions on our annual report.
Okay. Thank you. We have another question from Marie. What about the ones that ask for pictures that you did the thing, like walking outside?
I'm not sure I quite understand. Pictures that you did the...
Maybe did the
Can
activity?
I get a little more clarification of what that is? I'm having trouble picturing.
Angela, they
Yes.
talking about like sometimes libraries are posting like challenges or saying, hey, go do this thing, and then
Oh,
post a picture
sure.
that you're doing it.
Sure. That, in my mind, again, without knowing a little bit more, if I'm interpreting this wrong, and if you're saying, no, that's not at all what we're talking about, feel free to let me know. But things like online scavenger hunts or solicitations for, hey, everybody share your pet, or everyone do this, or show us what's out your window this day. I'm going to say that's more analogous to passive programming, something like doing a scavenger hunt in the library or setting up interactive stations. Again, it's a great way to interact with your patrons, but it doesn't really meet that programming definition. So in my mind, when I'm getting these questions about virtual things, it really is taking it and seeing what it is most analogous to in live, in a live library setting. And in that instance, I would say it sounds like it's probably closer to passive programming, which we do not count.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Angela.
Sure.
And it looks like there's no more questions right now, so we'll move on to Nicole.
Hello, everybody. Let me see if I can find my slides real quick. Whenever I do it, I always lose the teams. Can you see it? Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about our interlibrary loan and resource sharing services, which, as most of you guys know, are kind of on hold right now while everything else in physical library world is on hold. InfoExpress is currently suspended for the entire state until at least May 1st, in conjunction with the governor's executive order. And just like all of you, we're kind of paying attention to see what kind of loosening and what kind of different approaches he's going to be taking to that moving forward, and we'll adjust our plans according to those. So I don't have any idea at this moment exactly when that will be reopened. In terms of how it will be reopened, whenever it's determined to be reasonable to reopen the service, we will make that available to anyone who wants to use it. Not really expecting that everybody is going to be back online or back on InfoExpress at the same time. It's probably going to be everybody making different decisions about how that fits into their reopening plans. But we'll make that available to people who want to use it as soon as we can. You'll see an announcement from me via email about that, similar to how it was when we close things down. So if you're not on that email list and you think you should be, let me know. That's not included usually in the listservs that were discussed earlier in the presentation. We try to keep that just the InfoExpress context, since not everybody really needs to know about that. It's probably, in terms of reopening, it's probably going to look kind of the opposite as it did when we were closing things. We're going to get everyone suspended within the system, and then you're going to have to reach out to us to let you know when you want service to resume. So that way we're not sending drivers out to libraries who we have no idea what their status is. So we'll assume you're closed until we hear otherwise, even once the service is back up and running. We've been kind of working on making some changes to the portal to help us keep track of all of that stuff, and I'll let you know about those whenever that email comes out as well. We've been regularly in touch with Now Courier, so we're hopeful that things with the restart will go as smoothly as possible. But considering that the service has been down for a little while, there could be some bumps in the road to that. One of which being, we know every one of you is considering how to reopen safely and maybe making some adjustments that would affect your courier service. So if you are doing anything like that, the courier needs to call ahead, use a Dropbox, some other kind of way of making that exchange happen. When you do reopen, let us know what that might be so we can work it out with the courier. And then also, I just wanted to kind of mention that since the service has been down for a while, we don't completely know what the status is of all the drivers and routes, and the ways we were doing business before might change just a little bit. We have not heard of any mass exodus of drivers that now they're keeping busy with healthcare deliveries and things like that. But it's possible, when we come back, that your driver may not be there and things might just look a little bit different. So I'll ask, as we're giving in all circumstances right now, just for some and help with making come back online as smoothly as possible. The other thing I wanted to just mention really quickly, we don't have time for a discussion so much of this in this format, but as we've been getting a few questions and feelers from academic libraries regarding whether public libraries would be willing to accept materials returned from students who are now kind of scattered across the state and needing to get things back to their academic libraries. And we are pretty confident that the answer is going to be yes across most of the board, but I just wanted to float that out there and let everybody know that those requests might be coming. Our resource sharing committee is meeting on Friday to discuss normal things, and this is going to be on that agenda as well to kind of see if there's maybe any guidance that we want to put out around that question, but mostly I wanted to float it here just so that way you guys know. And then a question that might also be on some of your mind is renewal for 2020-21, which normally we open the renewal window around May 1st. We're, as of right now, still planning heading towards that as a target for reopening. We're still kind of discussing what the rates will be and a few other details, so that date might change. But I can tell you that the rates will not be any more than they were for 1920. So if you're planning, you can plan at least for that. More details will follow about the renewal once that portal is open. Like I said, we're aiming for May 1st. It may or may not be that exact date, but we'll let you know when we're ready. And then the other two things that kind of fall under my purview is CERCS and SHARE, which are both currently more or less inactive with the shutdown across the state. CERCS is obviously suspended because the only way you get things back and forth to each other is InfoExpress. And then Indiana Share is mostly down. We haven't taken it completely down because it is still possible to request copies through there, and it may be possible to get some physical items like if through the mail if that was something that you really needed, but there are obviously a lot fewer libraries with access to their physical collections right now, and it's just not something that we're seeing a whole lot of, at least for us. I've got a few questions about due dates and renewals for these interlibrary loan things, and most libraries are being very lenient about this, extending due dates and things like that, but most of that work is happening, I think, within their own ILSs, which doesn't necessarily translate over to CERCS or SHARE, so we'll need to kind of handle those requests by submitting renewals. And it's not something that you need to do right now, but once you get back up and running and are kind of trying to manage where everything is in your ILL processes, that would be how we would be handling those two formal renewal requests. And then in terms of how to get restarted with these services, whenever that might happen, it's mostly just reactivating with InfoExpress and then kind of undoing everything you did to close yourself down. And I'll probably send out messages about this as well once that's ready to go. And if you were not getting the messages about what to do with CERCS or SHARE in terms of shutting down for pandemic closures and you think you should be, that's something you can contact me about as well. The CERCS information does go out through the CERCS official listserv, but there's not a listserv for SHARE, so I just use the contacts that we have in Iliad for that. Let's see. And then in terms of if you're looking for things to do now, one, if you have not canceled any pending borrowing requests you have in SHARE, you can do that. That will just put them in canceled. And then if you need to reactivate them when you come back, you can do that. That just kind of keep them from pinging around to other libraries. I don't really know how many are left in the system. It's hard to see that overall view, and I haven't had time to log into each library to check. And then for both CERCS and SHARE, back in February, before we knew any of this was coming, I sent everybody a message with our updated resource sharing manual, which includes updated policies for CERCS and SHARE, and asked that you review those, review your settings, and then complete an online membership agreement form just to kind of get everybody on the same page with both of these services, since there's some, transition and things like that, and not everybody seemed to know quite what the expectations were. I sent out also a message, I think in March, suggesting that this was a good activity to do from home if you're looking for things to do. We still only have maybe 50% of libraries responding to both of these. So I'm floating it out there again with the caveat that it's obviously not a more important thing to do than take care of yourself, your family, your community, your library, or other pandemic related tasks that you have. So this can be low on your list, but if you are looking for things to do, it is easy to do from home. And there was an April 1st due date on that original email, which obviously we've blown way past at this point. And I'm not going to set any new due date or be reaching out to individual libraries asking, you know, why didn't you do this yet, until well after we're back up and ILL is running again. But I just wanted to float that out there. That is all the official stuff that I have. I see a question from Bonnie about a shipment from March 24th. Yeah, there should be a way that you can delete that or just move it forward to whatever your next date is. Bonnie, can you remind me what library you're with, and I can go in there and check that?
Okay.
Thank you. I'll go in there and look at it for you and reach out if there's something I need.
Okay, it looks like we have another question for you, Nicole. Is it okay for patrons to continue to place holds on items? Some patrons have asked if this is okay or if they should hold off until libraries reopen as to not overwhelm them.
Are you talking about in Circs? I would say that it's better to turn off patron requesting in Circs for the time being, because they're just going to be, those requests are going to be going out and hitting other libraries and eventually just coming back unfilled because there's nothing anybody can do with those. So I would say to just pause that for now. If you're talking about within your own ILS or within Evergreen, I don't know the official answer to what Evergreen would say. I think they might have suspended that capability, but don't quote me on that. I'm not positive. Within your own ILS, that's kind of up to you how you want to handle that, because it doesn't have anything to do with transit or other libraries. That's
Okay. All right. Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to kick it back over to the agenda, and then next we're going to hear from Haley.
All right. So I think by now everyone has had their regular board meeting schedule interrupted, but I thought I'd just give a quick review of recent temporary changes in regards to board meetings, which will be in effect for the duration of the public health emergency, unless it's superseded by new directives and orders. And all of this information comes from the governor's executive orders, State Board of Accounts, and DLGF memos and directives, and guidance from the Public Access Counselor. So library boards may continue to meet, but only for essential matters critical to the operations of the library. So this means the requirement for monthly meetings is suspended for the duration of the public health emergency. Library boards may meet electronically without the need to adopt a temporary policy allowing them to do so. This will probably make some trustees very happy because they've been asking for it for a while. But again, this is only temporary. So you still need a quorum for a meeting. So that means at least 4 members for a 7-member board. You still need to provide notice in accordance with the open door law, but you would provide notice electronically on the library's website or social media accounts. Part of that notice needs to include a link for the public and media to view the meeting in real time. And again, that link, as part of the notice, needs to be there 48 hours with the same notice as you would normally give. We have had someone ask at one of the regional webinars if you could require the public or media to request the link to the meeting rather than to post it publicly for security reasons. And while I appreciate the concern with that situation, it presents an undue burden to the requester. The part of the open door law that says you have to put the location of the meeting on the notice still applies even though it's not a physical address. In regards to executive meetings, the old rules still apply. It's just that it can be done electronically instead of in person. Electronic signatures are allowed if you have a document that would normally require board member signatures. And finally, for boards where you would normally approve claims for payment at your regular meetings, you can delegate that to a presiding officer or adopt an ordinance allowing for pre-approved payment of claims by the fiscal officer. And some libraries already have that last one in place. In both of these instances, those actions would be ratified or the payments allowed at the first meeting after the end of the emergency. And I wanted to talk briefly about plaque. The plaque disbursements for 2019 have been calculated. We're going to have 23 libraries receiving reimbursements as net lenders, with a price per loan coming out to about 54 cents per loan. We've submitted that to the business office, should be distributed to those libraries once it's been processed by the state auditor. Can't give you an idea of when that's going to be yet because everyone's, out of sorts. So if you apply for E-rate, you'll notice that some of the deadlines have been extended. Also, we've noticed this year, and this was happening before the pandemic, that the new company doing the reviewing for USAC has had a greater than usual number of PIA inquiries. Most libraries in Indiana that file are with the consortium, so you don't really need to worry about those details too much because AdTech takes care of that. But the increased PIA inquiries can cause a burden on libraries, especially in this time when folks mostly aren't in their usual offices. And so we've joined with other states in bringing that to USAC's attention. And if you have any questions about anything I've spoken about today, I am always available for email consultation. You can give me a phone call. I can still listen to my voicemails. So, all right. I don't see any questions in the chat.
All right. Thanks, Haley. Next up is Jen.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody, and happy National Library Week and also Earth Day. That's kind of fun. I just wanted to reiterate that our office is still here for you. We're trying to keep regular office hours Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. So if you have any questions, you can try to reach us individually or contact us at statewide-services@library.in.gov. And we'll get back to your question. And like Haley said, we all have the capability to receive voicemails, so we can get back to you if that's easier, just to call us and do it that way. So a few things that I wanted to mention. We're still trying to keep an active directory of library directors. So if you have anyone who's retiring soon or starting soon, please make sure you share their contact information with us so we can stay in touch with you while we're all out. Some exciting news, our Inspire databases are out for bid, so we will have a new package starting probably later this summer. There shouldn't be any interruption in the service, but our review committee will be looking at the responses to that and putting together something good for you soon. So we'll share news related to that whenever we've made that decision. If you've been using some of this downtime to work on your long-range plan, or if your board before everything was disrupted, has reviewed your bylaws, you can still send those to us and we're happy to update those for you. Other standards issues, like Jake mentioned, I just wanted to reiterate that we'll be extremely lenient this coming year. We understand that your hours are going to be thrown off, your collection expenditures may not be 8% this year, that kind of thing. So we'll be looking at individual and then across the board waivers for things like that. So please don't worry about that with so many other things to be worried about. We have a few upcoming trainings from our division that are coming up. We have a bond workshop in late May that there is a virtual participation option, and we plan to continue that. We haven't decided yet if we'll need to postpone the in-person meeting yet, so we'll update you for that. And then we also have budget workshops scheduled for June, which you'll have the option to participate online with those. And then the new directors workshop in August, that's usually an in-person meeting, but this past year we did try a virtual option with that, so that might be something that goes online as well, but we'll be sure to let everybody know as we get closer to those trainings. And then whenever we get back in the office, I have a mailing that we'll be sending your way. There's a couple posters for Historic Preservation Month, and DWD has shared a poster with us to send to the libraries. And we've got some census bookmarks that luckily with the timeline being extended will still be timely. And we even have annual report booklets for this past annual report that was completed. So we'll be sending those your way and you can read those or share those with your board. So we just wanted to let everybody know that we're thinking about you and we'll be here for you whenever you reopen.
Okay, thanks, Jen. It looks like Lisa wanted to know if the budget workshops for 2020, the link could be shared there in the chat. But other than that, I don't see any other questions just yet. Oh, Paula shared it. Thank you. And then I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to move to Sherry.
Okay. Is that showing up?
Yes.
Great. Now let's see if we can make it a slideshow. Okay. Hi, my name is Sherry Harris. I am the Certification Program Director and a legal consultant for the State Library. The purpose, I'm going to talk about Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, and there's going to be a little bit of alphabet soup in this. But the purpose of this law is to make it so that employees don't have to choose between acting in the interest of public health versus continuing to earn a paycheck. So basically, when people have paid sick leave available to them, they do a better job of confining themselves when they're contagious. And so that's really where this law is going, that and making sure people are in a position to take care of their kids whose schools are closed. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide pretty basic facts about this new law. And my usual disclaimer, this information is for informational purposes. So if you need to get advice that reflects the specifics of your situation, you will need to speak with your library's attorney. So some basic information. This is a very recent law. It was signed into law on March 18th and took effect on April 1st. And so it's brand new. The rules to it are brand new. They were only published on April 1st. They've been quickly implemented. It hasn't been tested yet. So there is no case law on it yet, which means while we can tell you what the law says, we don't really know how it will be interpreted in the future necessarily. So, but we do know that it applies to local governments and political subdivisions, including libraries who employ one or more people. So that is pretty much all of our libraries, even the very smallest ones. And it includes two different types of sick leave. There are 6 different reasons you can get paid sick leave under this statute. Under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, EPSLA. These are just the kind of acronyms that roll right off your tongue. Expanded FMLA under the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act only applies to one type. There's only one reason that that's provided in this. And I would encourage you to keep in mind that both of these are temporary and only last until the end of this year, at which point they expire. So also, whether you grant or deny paid sick leave or extended family medical leave, you should keep that documentation for 4 years. So because there are these 7 different components to what is available under these 2 laws, I've made a little chart to sort of cover who qualifies for it, what type of leave it is, what the qualifying reason is, and how long it can last, and also the rate, because as you can see, the first 3 qualifying reasons under the Paid Sick Leave Act pay 100%. That's because the first 3 reasons are actually when the employee is affected by illness or by the COVID-19 in these ways that are directly affecting the employee. And where I put EE on the chart, that's just my abbreviation for employee. So that's what that means. So the first 6 rows are all paid leave, paid sick leave that apply to all employees, even if they started the same day that they wanted to, that they need to start taking the sick leave, or they can take it the next day, starting the next day. There are caps on it. It lasts for 2 weeks, and it's a maximum of 80 hours. And there are financial caps on how much an employee is entitled to for each day or for the period of 2 weeks also. And those are included on a later screen. So the first 3 is if the employee is unable to work because the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Second, if the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. Or third, if the employee has coronavirus symptoms and seeks medical diagnosis. In those 3 cases, they are and they would get paid 100% of their usual fee, again, subject to a cap. And then the next 3 categories are all where a person would only receive 2/3 of their usual pay, also subject to a cap. But number 4 is an employee must care for someone who is subject to quarantine or isolation order, or is advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine. So there, the employee is caring for another person. Also in number 5, the employee is caring for their child whose school or care provider is closed or unavailable due to COVID-19. And then the 6th one is any other situation identified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And to my knowledge, the Secretary of Health and Human Services has not identified any other situations that fall under this category yet. So really, it's the first 5 that are likely to come up. And number 5, that language is reflected in the expanded FMLA. That is the only reason that expanded FMLA is allowed, is that an employee is unavailable to work because they have to care for a child whose school or care provider is closed. In that situation, they are eligible for up to 12 weeks of expanded FMLA. The first 2 weeks are not paid, except that the employee can, for the first 2 weeks, get paid under the Paid Sick Leave Act, since that same reason is available under the Paid Sick Leave Act. And then there's 10 weeks in which they would be paid at a rate of 2/3 of their usual rate, for a total of 12 weeks. The first 2 weeks may or may not be paid, depending on what option they pursue there. Okay. And there are some limitations. This does not apply retroactively. Paid sick leave does not carry over year to year, and there is no reimbursement available for unused leave. For personal sick leave, the emergency personal sick leave related to COVID-19, the maximum is 2 weeks, regardless of how many qualifying reasons a person meets. So you don't get 2 additional weeks for having a second reason that you qualify for. You get 2 weeks total. If you don't use the full 2 weeks on your first reason, you can use whatever's left of that 2 weeks on your second reason if you happen to fall into 2 different categories. And then on the expanded FMLA, if you've already used 12 weeks of unpaid FMLA within a year of this taking effect, you don't get an additional 12 weeks. So if an employee had a major illness and has already taken 3 weeks of regular FMLA because of that major illness, then they would only get the remaining 9 weeks of expanded FMLA if they needed it. So the total is still going to have to add up to 12 weeks within a year. And if I haven't confused you enough yet, we'll keep going. 2 weeks of paid sick leave is in addition to any other sick leave accrued under the employer's regular personnel policies. So if the employee is unable to work for one of the 6 specifically identified COVID-19 related reasons listed in the chart, that employee can get up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave in addition to any other sick leave that the employee has accrued under the employer's regular personnel policies. So it doesn't replace your personnel policies, but this is in addition to them and on top of them. Okay, the employee is paid for the hours that the employee would otherwise have worked. With that tops out at 80 hours for 2 weeks, and the pay is based on the employee's regular rate or minimum wage if that is higher, for reasons 1 through 3, and for reasons 4 through 6 to care for another person or family member. That is at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate. So that's capped at $200 per day and $2,000 for 80 hours. Okay, that's for the paid sick leave benefits. The expanded FMLA is temporarily expanded to add one qualifying reason, the one about staying home to care for children whose school has been closed, or daycare has been interrupted or closed or unavailable because of COVID-19. So temporarily, FMLA has had this one reason added to it for taking FMLA, expanded FMLA. But the employees and employers that this provision applies to under FMLA are different than traditional FMLA. So it does apply to libraries with 1 or more employees, even though you've been able to maybe avoid looking into what you would have to do under FMLA up until now. This expansion part still applies to you. It does not mean the other parts of FMLA now apply to you, just this one part. So a lot of this, the expansion includes a lot of employers who were not previously covered, and also the employee only has to have worked for you for I think it's a month, and it's considered a month if they've been on the payroll for a month. Okay, enough about benefits under FMLA. I'm sure that answered all of your questions, right? No, anyway, the resources. The resources that I've listed here, the first one, if you want just a little bit of more information about FFCRA, we have a memo and some updates posted on ISL's COVID-19 webpage. If you want a lot more information, that can be found on the Department of Labor's COVID-19 webpage, which I've listed here. And if you go there, you can find fact sheets, notice provisions, questions and answers, and links to the new rule. So this is a pretty condensed version of the law. If you want, that's it. I'm done, and I can take questions if you have them. And I wish you luck as you work through this. And I believe Sylvia is up next.
All right, thank you.
I'm here, getting ready to share my screen. Give me a sec. I remember how to have this in the next day. Okay, so are you guys now seeing my presentation?
Yes.
My PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm Sylvia Watson, the State Library's attorney. I'm going to be doing a high-level overview of some of the CARES Act provisions. All over the news lately, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to tell you that you don't already know, but hopefully you'll get a few bits of new information. The CARES Act is one of the laws Congress passed to respond to the impact the COVID-19 virus is having on the economy, public health, state and local governments, individuals and businesses. The CARES Act allocates $2 trillion for various purposes, some of which will go directly to individuals and some of which will go to businesses and various government entities. Like the FFCRA Sherry just talked about, the CARES Act is also brand new, just as of a few weeks ago. The act is over 300 pages long. It provides for financial relief in a lot of different areas. Literally new guidance and more information is coming out on how the law will be implemented pretty much on a daily basis. We haven't really known a whole lot about how libraries would capture CARES Act funds, but we are starting to now get some helpful information, and we'll continue to funnel that information to Indiana libraries as we know more. In terms of what the CARES Act does for libraries and their employees, I will talk about a few things we know right now. So for those concerned about the economic stability of employees or yourself during library closures, you should know that in the coming weeks, actually, I believe it's now started, the federal government is supposed to be distributing money to the general public without regard as to whether the person is employed or receiving any income or not. According to the IRS, tax filers with an adjusted gross income up to $75,000 for individuals and up to $150,000 for married couples are supposed to receive a $1,200 payment each. For tax filers with income above those amounts, the payments are reduced incrementally, and tax filers are not eligible for any money at all if their income exceeds $99,000 individually or $198,000 for those married filing jointly if there are no children. Eligible taxpayers who filed tax returns for either 2019 or 2018 will also automatically receive an economic impact payment up to $500 for each qualifying child under age 17 as well. And there is a cap to the total amount a family can receive per household. For example, a family of 4 is capped at $3,400. The IRS has information on their website about how to capture these funds if you don't end up receiving it over the next few weeks, although it's my understanding they're using direct deposit information that they may already have on file from your past returns, or if not that, sending to the address that was on your last return. So you shouldn't have to do anything. Unemployment. So furloughed employees and employees who have had hours reduced may qualify for unemployment. And the CARES Act modifies unemployment in a number of ways. Individuals on unemployment should be receiving an additional $600 per week above what they would have normally received in the absence of the CARES Act. And this is to go on for up to 4 months. And I did find information yesterday that shows these payments have finally started, I believe this week. Additionally, the 1 week waiting period typically required when receiving unemployment is waived. The CARES Act also adds up to 13 additional weeks of federally financed unemployment insurance benefits. So this is going to be added on to the normal 26 weeks of state and federal unemployment benefits that was previously available under existing regulations. And the CARES Act also provides payments to states to reimburse nonprofit organizations and local government agencies for some of the costs they are incurring through December 31st to pay for unemployment benefits. We did have a question about, in a previous meeting, about whether self-insured or the reimbursable employers are covered. And according to the Department of Workforce Development website, the guidance on that website, yes, those employers are covered. There are some additional unemployment and short-time compensation programs also available as a result of the CARES Act. Also, those who have had shorter work histories may now be eligible for unemployment benefits under the CARES Act, whereas normally they wouldn't be. So if you have not been employed very long and suddenly find yourself out of work, you may still qualify for unemployment, so it doesn't hurt to try and see. The Indiana Department of Workforce Development is the agency in charge of implementing the unemployment-related changes, and they have stated they're still working through some of the implementation logistics of all of this. Looks like they're working through them since they are now dispersing those $600 a week extra payments, but there is more that they need to implement. So if all this isn't happening right now, hopefully it will be soon. And if you have questions about the unemployment changes from the individual or employer perspective, I recommend looking at the Department of Workforce Development website and or contacting them directly with your questions. And you may want to check the website fairly regularly because I've been noticing they are updating it pretty frequently as they're getting all this figured out in terms of how they're going to implement all this. There is other help for individuals to ease the financial burden during this crisis. There have been some changes made to student loan payment requirements. Certain student loan payments and interest have been suspended. So contact your loan servicers if student loan payments are a concern for you to see if you may be eligible. for suspension of those payments. And there have also been some changes made to the receipt and use of education-related grants. Early distribution penalties are waived for some 401k retirement account distributions if they're made due to COVID-19. And we now have one of Governor Holcomb's newer executive orders, 20-21, in part responds to the CARES Act requirements and now permits COVID-19 related distributions from defined contribution perf accounts during 2020. Inactive and active perf members would qualify for this, so you will want to contact IMPERS for more information on the related rules and requirements for such withdrawals. There are also some mortgage relief provisions, some protections for renters. According to the CARES Act, I believe utilities aren't supposed to be shut off right now. And there's all kinds of additional help for individuals out there who may find themselves out of work or working reduced hours. But a lot of that goes beyond the scope of this meeting. Okay, so this slide shows some of the CARES Act programs public libraries don't currently qualify for. I included this slide because libraries are hearing about these programs and they're asking us about eligibility. So the the Coronavirus Relief Fund is supposed to provide payments to state and local governments to assist with COVID-19 related expenses. But in order to qualify for those relief funds, the local government entity must have a population of 500,000 or more, so that makes this money inaccessible for Indiana libraries. The Payroll Protection Program, which several of you have asked about, it's offered to small businesses. It's a forgivable loan as long as the company uses at least 75% of it to pay wages and retain employees. And according to current guidance, unfortunately, public libraries or public agencies in general can't use that program. Same thing with the Employee Retention Tax Credit. That's designed to help employers retain employees on the payroll, but current guidance says government entities are not eligible for that. But for some good news, because of the CARES Act, $50 million was allocated to the Institute of Museum and Library Services for the purpose of assisting with job, health, economic, and other high-impact relief. IMLS will be sharing these funds with the states, and based on preliminary information, Indiana is projected to receive approximately $600,000. We don't yet know the specifics on what criteria should be used to disperse funds to public libraries. IMLS should be providing the state library with the funds and additional guidance, and then from there, the state library will formulate a plan and get more information out to you guys on how to apply for those funds and be eligible for them. So we'll keep you updated as we get more information on this. IMLS is also expected to announce additional measures they plan to implement to assist museums and libraries, both through its current funding and that received through the CARES Act. So again, as we know more, we'll share that information with you as well. And in the meantime, I guess best advice is, to the extent possible, you may want to be documenting your COVID-19 related expenses. Public libraries may want to be doing this. Your expenses and losses related to the public health emergency in the event there is at some point financial assistance available to assist in recouping some of those losses. So there is much more to the CARES Act, but this is just kind of a high-level view of some of the provisions we know about right now. And I'm going to exit out of my presentation so I can see if there are any questions, because I can't see the chat.
It doesn't look like we have any yet.
Okay. So do you want to just go on to Wendy, and then if questions come in later, I can get to those?
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks, Sylvia.
All right. So first of all, thank you, everyone, State Library folks, for all the answers you provided so far today. We are getting to the point now where we have answered everything that we can, and now we're all left with a bunch of questions. So the question I have for us is, where do we go from here? I think that libraries are doing a good job of meeting their community needs in, why can't I pull it there? Okay. In new and exciting ways. And so congratulations to all of you for doing that, and keep up the good work, because what you're doing does matter to your communities, and we're seeing lots of positive chatter about libraries because of what you're doing in the ways that you're adjusting to this new world that we're all living in. One thing that we know for certain is that the only thing we know for certain is that there's not going to be much that we know. We've got to be comfortable with a higher level of uncertainty going forward. And we all know that in general, librarians are not very good with handling uncertainty. But when the pandemic is over, as we're trying to rebuild everything and restore all of our services, we need to keep in mind that the rest of society is going to be going through a remaking of itself as well. So we need to provide as much grace as we can to our partners as we are all starting to come back together. One thing that we can do, a lot of leaders have said that, this is getting back to normal. It's not going to be like turning on a light switch. So taking baby steps, coming back to service in different stages is probably the best way that we're going to be able to reopen services and start reaching back to where we were before the pandemic hit our communities. As we're doing this, libraries are already showing some great leadership in this. Even before the pandemic hit, the Porter County Public Library System had a really great YouTube video on how they were doing no contact curbside delivery and extra precautions they were taking on their materials. There are libraries that are starting to share their plans for reopening. I know the Bell Memorial Public Library recently shared their plan on the Listservs. So as we encouraged you earlier to please be subscribed to the Listservs, we're also encouraging you to share as much information with your colleagues via those Listservs as possible, because just a wealth of information is going back and forth, and it's helping everybody to plan in these very uncertain times. For libraries that are going to be doing that phased reopening or staging it in different segments, the one key piece of advice that seems to come across all plans like that is to communicate. So communicating as much as possible to your staff. First of all, making sure they know that the library has this plan, and that, just because we're not going to be immediately back to where we were before the pandemic doesn't mean we're not going to get back there eventually. But just being as open as possible with the steps that you're taking, and especially the extra steps that you're taking to protect the safety of patrons and staff. Really, really beneficial right now. One last thing. On our COVID page, we do have a form that many of you filled out already. We were asking questions like, if you would be closing and what date you would be closing. And for a while, libraries had some dates of reopening that we were able to use that form to populate a spreadsheet that's also on our COVID page. Typically, the dates of reopening have been changed to be determined, and that remains true for now. But as you start to get those dates that you will reopen, if you'll go back to the COVID page and fill out the form, then we can keep that spreadsheet up to date on what libraries across the state are doing as far as reopening, and that will help your colleagues all around the state as they're planning their restoration of services. Couple of good things to note. So the IMLS CDC webinar that we talked about earlier today really is a great one. If you haven't seen it, please, please, please find that one and watch it, because you're going to feel so much better about how the virus doesn't really live on library materials, and how to be safe with library materials when you do start to restore services. So it's a really, really great webinar. It's just under an hour, and the epidemiologists were just very, very communicative and very clear in what they can be doing and what we should be doing. I know that after that webinar, there was a lot of discussion in social media, especially on Twitter, about libraries are not just concerned about their materials, but about the patron-staff interactions. And of course, that's a different level of care that we need to be taking, different steps that we need to be exercising to ensure the safety of our patrons and our staff. But at least for the materials, we can have some comfort in knowing that they're not likely to spread the virus. We have shown that in general, libraries are very resilient and very adaptable, and that no matter what happens, we're finding ways to serve our patrons. And PLA's recent survey highlighted how libraries have done a great job of expanding virtual services in the last 4 to 6 weeks. And I think that's just been a really great story to tell, and a great reminder that you're not alone in this extra services you're providing to your community. This is happening nationwide, and we're all here to help each other through this very uncertain time. We have been the trusted place for getting information for over 100 years, and we continue to be that trusted place. And so as libraries are keeping their communities up to date on what accurate information is available around the virus, this has been really helpful to the communities, and the communities have been very grateful to the libraries for that. One thing that we do need to keep in mind that is not so great is that we know that we're going to be coming out of this and going into a recession again. Just like with the Great Recession, that means that probably library services will be heavily used again in the future, collections, public computers, things like that. But while that is true, we also need to be aware that tax income is going to be lower than had been projected. So for the coming years, considering that we'll probably be dealing with a decreased tax income overall, is going to be something we're going to be planning for and preparing for. Amy Webb is a futurist who writes a lot of books and articles, and I just really like the way that she thinks about things. So I wanted to share from an article that she had published on medium.com about a month ago on how futurists cope with uncertainty. And it takes you through the steps to do this thought exercise together with any kind of leadership, with your administration, with your board, of going through the axes of uncertainty and starting to make concrete plans for the libraries. So I'll just take you through how this works. Basically, you start with listing the uncertainties, basically the fears that you are having about, what's it going to be like when we can get back to providing services, and as things start to get back to normal. So I stole the first one from her article there, and that's the top middle of my slide here, that COVID-19 leads to a reduction in labor supply. So basically, you write down that you think that's a possibility. And then you write down the polar opposite of that, so that COVID-19 does not lead to a reduction in the labor supply. And drawing a two-way arrow between it demonstrates that somewhere along that line is going to be the reality that we're going to be living in. We don't know where exactly along that line. A lot of different factors will be taking into account before we know where we'll be plotting, but we do know it's somewhere along that line will be the truth. So when you've done that with various uncertainties, just keep listing your uncertainties and keep listing the polar opposites of those uncertainties. Just for a while, just a brainstorming exercise is going to be really beneficial in that. Once you've got several uncertainties, you can start to kind of categorize them into buckets, like a social uncertainty or economic uncertainty, which is what I have on the slide here. You could also have technological administrative uncertainties. You could have uncertainties that are under your control, like what the library's labor force will look like. Ones that are out of your control, like what publishers are going to be doing with ebooks. So there's so many things that are going to be playing into what the future is going to look like that we can start to really think about. When you've got your uncertainties categorized into buckets, then you take any uncertainties from any two different buckets and just show how they meet together. So that's what this the axis does here. So if people do want to continue social distancing and they don't want to touch anyone ever again, and we no longer do handshakes, that's a possibility that we could be living in the future. And then the other end of that is people may just be dying to have physical interactions again and crave that kind of attention that they can get from other people. So somewhere along that continuum is where we're going to probably be in terms of what the society is going to want in terms of interactions with other people. So when you take that and cross-section it with the COVID leading to a reduction in the labor supply or not leading to a reduction in labor supply, then you can see that you kind of have these quadrants of 4 different ways that you can start to think about what will happen. And so like in the upper left corner there, if there's a reduction in labor supply and people want to continue social distancing, we may not see a lot of use for our meeting rooms and programs and things like that, but people may be coming in wanting to use their computers even more. And if they are wanting to use their computers even more, but they're afraid of what other germs people are carrying, then we may need to allow time in between computer usage to disinfect computers. And we may want to do more appointment kinds of things. So, we may have to do some crowd control as people are especially filling out unemployment, because we know that that is a huge thing right now, and it's just going to continue for the foreseeable future. We're going to have a lot of unemployment filers. So being prepared for that as we start to reopen our doors is going to be one step the library can take. So basically, when you've got your axes of uncertainty together, then you can start to think about, okay, if this is true and this is true, these are some things we can do at my library to help our community. And then thinking about it in another direction, if something else is true. So it gives you a way to start to think about various risks that you could see coming, whether they're long-term, short-term. If there are any existential risks to the entire industry, you can start to think about what your library can do to mitigate each of those risks a little at a time. So it's just a really good thought exercise, and like I said, the medium.com article that is listed here does take you through the steps of how to do this. So a couple of things as libraries are starting to talk about what it's going to look like when we reopen. There are a lot of questions about what do we do if boards and staff continue to be concerned about the virus and if they're concerned about their safety. Sylvia wrote a really great blog post on what libraries can do in terms of that additional concern that may be in people's minds as we're starting to reopen. Things like, maybe we don't allow anyone to use our meeting rooms except for the library and board for a while. As long as that rule is being applied consistently across the board, no one other than the library is allowed to use library meeting rooms. That's not a problem. It's just, have that policy in place and make sure that it's clearly communicated that that's what's going on for now. There are additional things that you could try to put into place that, we can borrow from some of the retailers that have stayed open on, keeping people 6 feet apart by putting tape on the floor, removing chairs and computers. I know before the pandemic, Bartholomew County was starting to do this, where they were taking some of their furniture from the public area and just storing it in the meeting room and locking it away, so that it encouraged people to, if they were in the library, to stay at least 6 feet apart from each other. So there are steps that we can take to help make everyone feel a little bit better about coming back into society and starting to interact with each other again. And as you have those things come to your mind and you start to make those policies for your libraries, if you want to share those back out on the listservs, then again, you'll be helping the community as a whole. So my last thing is just the resources that I put together from this, and we will have the PowerPoint up to the COVID site shortly. So I believe I don't have any questions.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat box now and we'll try to get those answered for you. And just a reminder, we will be posting the recording, the chat, and all the documents and resources shared on our COVID-19 page. And this is worth an LEU. Good question, Sarah Joy. You just took the words right out of my mouth. This is worth an LEU, so you can go ahead and create one and have your director or board member sign it. 2 LEUs. Thanks, George. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and post those.
And if you don't, thank you all for coming, and thank you for everything that you're doing for your communities, because I know that everybody's working above and beyond right now. Thank you all.
Looks like a question. Any change on librarian recertification due in June?
Not at this time, but we will reevaluate that as we go. And if we do, we'll send something out.
Thank you, Jake. All right, well, thank you again, everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, and then we'll get all the information to you on the COVID-19 page.